Ever get that, like, rush of nostalgia? When you find, a box of your old games.
Yeah.
Kind of makes you want to, I don't know, blow in a cartridge or two, right?
Absolutely.
Well, get ready, because this deep dive is all about retro gaming. But it's bigger than just our memories. It's a whole thing now.
Yeah, it's really amazing to see how retro gaming has blown up. I mean, we've got these massive events now, like the Portland Retro Gaming Expo. Speaking of,
You're in the right place for this one. This guide we found, it's all about the expo, happening right as we speak. And let me tell you, 250,000 square feet dedicated to retro gaming. That's wild.
it really shows you how important this all is now, right? Like, remember when gaming was kind of niche? Now it's mainstream, huge conventions, the Oregon Convention Center even.
Right. Totally. And we're not just talking about folks huddled around dusty cartridges. This expo, it's got everything. Cosplay, tournaments, DJs. Can you imagine walking in, hearing that 8-bit music blasting?
Oh, I bet it's electric, like stepping back in time, but with a huge crowd who gets it.
Exactly. And what's cool, this guy mentions the expo actually started back in 2006. Pretty small. And now look at it.
It's like a microcosm of gaming itself, right? From niche hobby to, well, this huge cultural force.
And it's not just these big events either. Remember how we used to have to dig out old consoles to play?
Oh, tell me about it.
Now you can play tons of these classics right in your browser. We actually found this article, Best Retro Games in Browser. It's amazing how accessible they've become.
Right. And that's part of the magic, isn't it? That pick up and play, instant fun. But now, anyone with the internet can get in on that.
Totally. And it's funny, nostalgia is a big part of it, sure. But these games, a lot of them still hold up.
Absolutely. It's a chance for older gamers to relive the good old days. And for younger gamers, it's like discovering these lost treasures.
Speaking of which, let's get back to this expo. I'm picturing it now. Rows and rows of vendors selling all the vintage games and collectibles you could dream of. The glow of those arcade cabinets.
Oh, and the tournaments. The guide really emphasizes the community aspect of it all. The panels, the presentations, the cosplay. It's about connecting with people who share your passion, you know?
And that's what makes these events so special, right? It's not just about the games themselves. It's the shared experience, the memories. And what's great about this guide, it gives you those insider tips. Like they mentioned vendors having these bundle deals. We got to watch out for those.
Right. Makes it super useful, not just like a basic overview.
Totally. And then they even shout out the Portland Indie Game Squad. I think they're usually at these things showing off their stuff.
That's so cool. Shows how retro gaming isn't just the past, it's influencing new games even now.
That's like this whole loop of creativity feeding back and forth.
Yeah.
And speaking of preserving the past, this Nintendo museum opening, that's got to be wild.
Oh, yeah. Source number 4. Talk about a blast from the past, right? This museum in Japan, it's like the whole history of Nintendo. From playing cards, can you believe it? All the way to the Switch.
Wow.
But get this, they're selling Virtual Boy merch.
Now that's interesting. For those who don't know, the Virtual Boy, it was this whole VR thing back in the 90s, but kind of flopped.
Oh, yeah. Way ahead of its time. Big clunky headset. And the graphics. Red and black. That's it. Gave people headaches. And the games weren't that great either, to be honest.
It happens. But the fact they're even selling this stuff at the museum, it says something, right?
Totally. Like even the failures are part of the story.
Exactly. One person's trash. Oh, and speaking of rediscovering things, the Lunar Remastered collection.
Oh, yeah. Those were huge back in the day. RPG classics.
Right. And now they're getting all polished up for modern gamers.
It's smart, right? Because it's not just nostalgia. They're actually putting in the work to make them look and play well by today's standards.
It's like those old movies, getting the 4K treatment, same heart, just, prettier to look at now. And it's a win-win, really. You get to re-experience these classics, but with, like, modern graphics and all that. And for newer gamers, well, it's their chance to see what the fuss is about.
Exactly. It keeps those old games alive for new audiences. And it makes you think, right? This whole retro thing, it's not just games. Look at board games. They're huge now. Vinyl records, too. Everyone wants that old school sound.
It's true. And that makes me think about what we want to leave our listener with today. We've been talking retro games, but it's like a tiny part of something way bigger, like this need for the tangible stuff from a different time. It's everywhere.
Yeah, it's weird, right? We're more digital than ever, but then people crave these analog experiences. What's up with that, right?
It's like with vinyl, there's that whole ritual, putting on the needle, that little crackle before the music starts. It's more, I don't know, intentional than just hitting play on Spotify.
I get that. And those old games, too, they had limitations, right? So you had to be more creative, think strategically, instead of just like button mashing your way through.
Totally. And, going back to that expo, it's not just tea about the games, is it? It's the people, the memories, that feeling of, I don't know, simpler times maybe.
Yeah, like holding on to something good. And in a world that's always going a mile a minute, maybe that's what we need, a little bit.
So to everyone listening, whether you're retro pro or just curious about these old school games, remember it's more than just nostalgia. It's a whole community celebrating these amazing games.
Yeah.
And sometimes the simplest things, they're the most fun.